Okay. What's going on, people? Welcome to episode 21 of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents with me, Georgio Savvides, and I'm joined by a really super amazing guest, the founder of artist management and development platform 321 Artists LA, Gregg. How you doing? You okay?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
You know what? Not too bad. Not too bad. How's things? All right?
Good, good. Yeah, getting through,
Yeah.
getting through.
Good. Have you keeping busy?
Really busy. I think everyone's like having to um use this time as wisely as they can. So
Yeah.
I've been really busy, like with the artists that I manage as well. It's just been learning what we can be doing at the moment. So I think they're going a bit nuts with
Yeah.
me being like, right, let's do this week, and this week we're going to do this. But yeah, it has been really busy, which is really
Yeah.
nice.
What's it like working from home for you? Did you have your own office to go to beforehand, or was it always
No,
from home?
so it's always been from home. So three to an artist is something that I kind of do on the side. So I have a day job, which I've been furloughed from at the moment. So at the moment, it's just all day spending time on three to an artist, which is amazing because I've never had this time just to spend on the company before. I've
Mm,
always had to juggle it with day jobs. So it's really nice to have this time where I can be like, right, what do I want to achieve with 321, and what can I be doing in the time that I've got that I'm not going to have again to
mm.
spend on 321. So it's been a really exciting time for me, which I'm really grateful for. I've been in a very fortunate position to do it, but otherwise, no, it's just normally just working from home,
Oh,
or
brilliant.
like working wherever I can, really.
Yeah, 'cause I wanted to get into actually how what your targets were for the company, which I'll get into in a little bit. But how long have you been running the company for now? 321.
Um, so it's been running for about, I'd say, 2.5, nearly 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it came around by I fell into artist management by accident, really. So I discovered a band, and I hadn't really thought about artist management before, but as soon as I met them, I was like, yeah, I really want to work with them.
Mm,
So I started managing them, and I was like, oh, I was achieving a lot with them, and they were in NME magazine and on BBC Radio 1, and I was like, I helped them do that. I achieved that, and I
mm.
wanted it to be, I wanted to create a platform where I could call my own and say, we did that. So that's why I set up Three to an Artist. But soon after setting it up, I realized that I wanted it to be more than just management, and I had so many people messaging me saying, oh, we really want you to work with us, and I couldn't physically manage all the people that were coming to me. So that's where the development side of things started to really pick up. And I tried to think, well, if I can't manage you, then maybe I could spend an hour talking to you, or maybe I could, write an EPK for you, or help you with your biography, and making things as high quality for them as I could, and knowing that that would put them in a good stead to be able to approach other managers and things like that. So, but yeah, it's flown by, absolutely flown
That's
by. But it's
brilliant.
been, yeah, about 2.5, nearly 3 years now.
Amazing. And you said you fell into it accidentally. Were you always into music, or were you doing something completely different beforehand?
Yeah, I've always been into music, so especially emerging music since I was about, I don't know, 15.
Mm,
And I really, I loved the idea of knowing an artist that whoever was sat next to me in geography at school didn't know.
mm-hmm,
And it was amazing to be able to go to these concerts where you would go to the concert, and then the artist would come out into the audience, and you could chat with them for half an hour after the show. And
mm-hmm.
to build those relationships have always been so important. Um, so that was back when I was about 15. And then when I was 17, I was approached by a company called Secret Sessions. And then it was from there that I met Blushes. And then about 6 months after discovering them, I started managing them. So I started working with their management team, and then to get a bit of experience. And then their current manager at the time was like, I don't really have time to be doing this project anymore. And I was just left, and I was like, well, there's this band here who are doing really, really well and have great potential. I could walk away and know they'd be picked up straight away by someone else, or I could jump in the deep end and see if I could give it a go. And that's what I did. So it's one of those decisions that if I hadn't made that decision, then I don't know what I'd be doing now. I definitely would be having this conversation with you, which is
Oh,
really interesting. So
You know, because I've seen like the work you do obviously with 321. I think it's honestly so amazing. And
Thank
to
you.
think that you're so young as well still and you've achieved so much, it's incredible.
Mm,
And you said you started at 15 with this whole kind of route into management. Did you find
mm.
it really hard kind of going into certain events and clubs at that age?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I hadn't really ever, and I guess looking back now, I think if I saw like, 14, 15-year-olds going to a gig in London by themselves, I'd be like, whoa, like they're quite young to be doing that. But that's what I was doing. And I never really thought about it until quite recently. And I was really lucky, like the artists who I supported, there was a nice little bubble of artists who, like I said, you kind of built relationships with them, and it was like you'd go to their gig, they'd like you spend time with them after the show, and they'd walk you back to the train station to make sure you got home safe.
Mm,
Like it was those relationships you make, and I think as an artist manager, I always look back at what I experienced and how the artist treated me and how special that relationship was, and I always try with the artists I manage to remind them of that and remind them that you could have hundreds of thousands of streams, but to know a group of people so personally that are going to come to every show, they're going to buy every piece of merchandise, they're going to shout about every blog that you've been featured in, they're the ones you need to keep close, and they're the
hmm
ones you need to kind of work the hardest with, I think.
Yeah,
um
definitely.
and I think the artists that I managed and manage now have done that really, really well.
Mm.
So it's definitely interesting to see how my experiences growing up around emerging music are kind of being reflected in how I manage artists now, which is it's exciting as well.
It
And it's
is.
really cool to think back. So I manage a guy now called Split the Dealer, a guy called Sam, and I started supporting him when I was 15 years old,
Wow.
and he like was doing this like a solo acoustic artist kind of vibe at the time. And then when I was 18, he performed at my birthday party.
Oh, really?
um yeah, in his he was in a duo at the time called Circus Street, and then he started this new project last year called Split the Dealer, and he was like, Ella, I can't think of anyone else better, like you've
Mhm.
been there from the very beginning. He was like, it's a no-brainer, you need to be part of my team and somehow. And now I'm managing him, which is really strange. He brings it up all the time. But it's just incredible how those relationships you form um, come back down the line, and
Mm,
the harder you work early on, I think the more you gain later, which is really nice.
100%. And do you kind of look for a particular genre of artist, or are you open to kind of any?
um I think so. Blushes were an indie band. Split the Dealer, he's kind of like indie with a bit of like R&B and hip hop in there as well.
Mhm.
So and I manage another band called Honeybees who are quite indie based as well. I think I don't, maybe I subconsciously do because it's what I know and what I'm probably most comfortable with.
Mhm.
But there's so many artists that I look at and be like, oh, I'd love to manage them. For example, I've been working with a poet recently, and I remember being like, I really want to manage him. But I was always quite cautious about jumping between different genres, just
Mhm.
because a lot of my contacts that I have are indie based, or they're more geared towards um, pop music, or specifically bands who they work with, for example. And I think managing a poet would be incredible. And this guy, he's amazing. But it's one of those things where you don't know if it's um, too much of a risk, especially quite early on in my career. But I think the important thing about that is honesty. And I've had this conversation with him, and I said, I'd love to, but I'm not comfortable. I'd want to do a good job. And I think it's being honest that you can't be good at everything
Yeah.
at the same time. It takes
Mhm.
time um, to develop the skills for every project that comes to you. And I
Of
think it's just
course.
about being honest enough to say, not right now.
Yeah. How important do you think it is to be honest with the artist from the get-go? Do you think it's really crucial, or is it something else you can work around?
No, it is completely crucial. So I'm honest with my artists all the time,
Hmm.
and I'm probably more honest than they thought I was going to be. Especially Sam, because I've grown up with Sam and I supported Sam, and I was a fan of him before managing him. I think Sam thought he was in for quite an easy ride, and he was going to be down for someone who's just going to be like, yeah, that's amazing. That track's amazing. That's your best one yet. Whereas when he sends demos, sometimes I'm a bit like to him, well, that's not your best, but we can work on it. But I am really honest with them, and I'm really strict with them as well.
Hmm.
Like if I set them a target or something and they haven't reached it, um, I'm always one of these people that aren't really that fussed by numbers, but giving them targets and things to work towards is really important. And I always try to ensure that we have that kind of understanding that although we're all good friends and we all get along, I'm going to be honest with you at all times.
Hmm.
And if there's something you say that I don't like, I'm going to tell you. And if there's something that you do or a joke that you say in a live stream that I think's a bit,
Hmm.
inappropriate, I'm going to tell you. And I think it's really important. I think for an artist, you bring a manager because you want guidance.
Hmm.
You bring a manager because you want that knowledge and you want that support. And you want someone to say, no, you're doing that wrong, or you could be doing that better. I think being honest is one of the most important traits of a manager. I mean, if you can't take that honesty or you can't take criticism and feedback, then you might not be at a stage where you're ready to have a manager just yet as an artist. And I think
Hmm.
it's just about knowing when that is, and you'll know straight away when you're ready to have a manager. But I think managers are quite, because I say to my artists all the time, it's not just your reputation, it's mine. Like,
Hmm.
as your manager, you're representing not only your own brand, but you're representing 321. And if you're not acting how 321 would want you to be, then you're putting me in a bad light. And I think it's just about having that respect and that understanding.
Yeah.
um so that was quite a long answer to your question,
That's
but I
fine.
think if you don't have that honesty and you don't have the confidence to be honest, that's where it kind of goes wrong.
Yeah.
With blushes and with Split the Dealer, I'm younger than all of them, which was a really interesting um, concept to kind of get my head around. I remember when I first started managing blushes, I was like, right, well, I'm younger than all the members, and I've got to be the one to be assertive, and I've got to be the one to be honest and give them criticism and tell them they shouldn't be doing that and they can't be doing this. And I really struggled with it at first. I think I didn't want to like upset anyone. I don't want anyone to think that um I didn't want them to get the wrong impression of
Impression.
me,
Yeah.
especially early on. But I think like I say, as a manager, you bring them in because you want that guidance and advice and knowledge. So I think I got over that quite quick.
Yeah. Could you kind of answer my next question there? Because I wanted to ask how you found being honest with people. Was it quite natural
Mm.
to you, or did you have to kind of build up that confidence to say, this is my job now, and I want you to
Mm.
improve?
Unfortunately, I've always been one of those people who are really honest,
Mm.
and I'm a bit like, if I'm not happy with something, I'll say it. I'm like one of those people, like, if you're in a group, I'll be the one who kind of like leads it, and I like make sure the job's done well, kind of thing. So I've never really had trouble with being honest.
Mm.
I think it's more just understanding the group of people that you're with and being honest too, and kind of maybe like adapting like your language or how you come across.
Mm.
With like Split the Dealer, he's been managed before, so he understands. He kind of gets that relationship. Whereas honeybees are quite young and they've never been managed before. So if
Mm.
I'm being assertive with honeybees, the way I come across and present that is different to how it would be with Split the Dealer. I think as a manager, it's just about tweaking how you word things to get your own way, which I think I'm quite good at.
Good. I couldn't agree more about being honest with people. I think because you have to be, don't you? If you want the best for them, I'm sure they will appreciate you being honest with them in the first place. So keep up the great work.
I think it's the same thing as well with, it's not necessarily being honest about them, it's being honest about yourself. So there's a lot of times where, so honeybees are quite new in their career as a band and as artists, and sometimes they'll be like, well, what does this mean, or what is this, or I don't know, what's the name for this, or what's the benefits of having this. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, actually I don't know the answer to that question. I'm being honest and not like, you know, trying to ramble for a couple of minutes and hope that somewhere in that answer it makes sense and you actually end up answering the question. Like just saying to them, I don't know the answer, but if you give me a couple of days, I'll find out and I'll come back to you. And normally they have a lot more respect for that than just guessing.
Kind of adding to that, I did see that you put a tweet out quite recently saying if you don't know what an EPK is, you're not ready to be an artist. And
well, I don't think it's not that they're not ready. It's like, it's more, I don't know. I think the point of that tweet was that every artist has to begin somewhere. And you can't expect artists to know everything from day one. And unfortunately, in the industry that we're in, they're expected to know everything. They're expected to release a single and know exactly how to release a single, where to release a single. I spoke to an artist the other day who didn't know what a distributor was, and they were like, I don't know what that means. And I sat down and I explained it the best I could so they would understand it. But this is what I mean. There aren't the resources out there for artists to be able to know everything at once. But because, you know, opportunities and things, a lot of the time there's only space for a small amount of artists to get that opportunity. So whether it be a feature in a blog or, you know, a tour support slot or something like that, there's only a certain amount of people that are going to be able to get that. And if there's 5 people applying, one artist got everything, one hasn't got an EPK, one hasn't got a great biography, someone hasn't got great press shots, and someone sent a file in an email rather than a link, the one that's got everything is going to be top of that list because they've got everything. Whereas the guy who doesn't have an EPK, he could be the best person for that slot ever, but he's missed out because he doesn't have everything. But that person who does have everything might have just taken the time to do the research and managed to blag this opportunity because he knows more than the other people, and that's not fair. So I think it's about I think the tweet, it was more focused at encouraging artists to understand that they can't be expected to know everything, but there are basic things that if you just did or you know spent time doing, you'd be at a better stage and you'd be better equipped for if an opportunity came along. But in terms of EPKs, like, it's so common. I've got so many messages being like, I don't know what an EPK is, and that's fine. Like, if they don't know these things, that's why companies like Three to an Artist exist. And I'm not the only one who does, you know, consultancies or offers to make artists EPKs. But that's why it's so important and kind of confirms why companies like mine are needed, because artists don't know these things and they're kind of thrown into the deep end without the knowledge. So yeah, EPKs, if you're an artist listening to this and you don't have one, go and make an EPK. If you don't know what one is, email me and I'll tell you.
I'll leave your email below, don't worry. But kind of going back to earlier to what you said about being so young in the industry, have you found that people have shown you respect, or do you find that you find people have kind of ignored you in a way for being so young?
I think it's a mixture, because I think when you're hiding behind an email, they
Hmm.
don't know how old you are anyway. So
Yeah.
if you're just sending emails, that's fine. Like you kind of just carry on. It's obviously more when you're in person, people tend to make you. I feel more aware of it when I'm in person. There was one gig with Blushes, where the sound engineer didn't pay me any respect at all, and I was saying to him, I think I was just asking him to change the levels or something, or I think it was like Tiff's microphone, it was just turned off. And I went to the sound engineer, like, can you turn her microphone on? And he just looked at me. I think he must have thought I was just some like girl in the audience kind of thing. And I went up to him afterwards and I was like, did I introduce myself before the set? And he was like, oh no, I don't think so. I was like, hi, I'm Ella, I'm Blush's manager. And he looked at me and he was like mortified. I think he
Really?
just didn't realize like that actually I was trying to be helpful. And I think there's been a couple of times where I've been like, that wouldn't have happened if I was that bit older, or
Hmm.
but I think on the whole, people have been really impressed with the fact that I am that bit younger. But I think most people just kind of, there's so much going on all the time, and there's people meet so many people that they don't really have time to be worrying about how old someone is, or
Yeah.
they kind of just get on with it, which is really nice for me actually. And I've kind of noticed it less, but I think maybe that's because I've been less aware of it. I think
Hmm.
when I think about it more, that's when I think, oh, maybe they're being a bit off with me because I'm that bit younger, not probably because they've had a really stressful day, or they just want to get the show done and go home.
Hmm.
So I think it's more something that I've been more aware of than other people, I think.
Yeah, 'cause I've got to ask actually what kind of things you've learned got through different events being so young. Have you learned how to deal with different people at different times, or what kind of lessons have you learned starting this business?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Do you mean like
How to deal with
how
that
I
kind of,
talk to different people, or
yeah, yeah.
how um I think with being a manager, regardless of my age, I think reminding myself that when I'm at a gig, if there's like multiple bands playing, um I have to kind of stop myself and trying to organize everyone. Like I'm kind of like, right, you're doing this, okay, and then after they've done that, you're doing this, and then it's your turn, and then you're doing this, and I have to be like, oh, actually, I'm not their managers. Like,
Yeah.
I can just only manage like my little team. I think so. I think that's something that I've had to kind of like rein in a bit, is like wanting to be the one who organizes everything.
Hmm.
I think in terms of what I've learned, I never, so because I was kind of like thrown into the management side of things, I didn't really know a lot about the live side of things. So if someone said to me, I can't hear the wedge, I'd have no idea, not a clue. I'd be like, I don't know what that means. Like the different like pieces of equipment. I remember I had to sit down with Blushes and be like, right, I think um I think I'm really struggling with all these different types of equipment and what all these words are and everything like that. And I remember the drummer from Blushes made me like a presentation, and he like put photos and like name tags next to everything, and I would learn how what they all meant. That was really tough, I think. And I think you're kind of, again, as someone who, whether you're an artist or a manager, when you first get into that live side of things, it can be really overwhelming.
Hmm.
Like um, a lot of people, a lot of artists, they just want to play music. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes they get caught up in, right, we're a band now, and that means we need to market ourselves, and that means we need to write a tech spec, and that means we need to do this, and when we perform live we need to remember to do this. And they're like, actually, we just want to muck around in a rehearsal room for a couple of hours a week.
Hmm.
um so I think I really struggled with the live side. at the
Yeah.
start. I'm still not a pro now, I must admit. I go to a gig and I'm like, right, you guys can set up. I'll just stand here and make sure it all sounds what I think is meant to be right.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think in terms of that, that's kind of what I've had to learn quite
Yeah.
quick.
Because going back to what you said about being kind of overwhelmed sometimes, how do you deal with being overwhelmed? Do you kind of have to take a step back sometimes and take a deep breath, or have you learned how to deal with several different things at the same time?
I think being overwhelmed is so common,
Yeah.
for especially for managers, because managers are kind of there to kind of hold everything together. And if you're not, if you
Yeah.
haven't got everything held together, then you can't expect everyone else to.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's about, it goes back to being honest. So if I'm having a day where I know that I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I'm feeling really swamped with work, and I know that if I try to do anything, it's not going to be the best quality, and I just need a day just to stop. I'll just put a message in our group chat being like, boys, like, it's not going to happen today. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I just need a bit of space. And they're like, yeah, fine. Like, we'll crack
Yeah.
on. And some people would be like, you can't say that as a manager. Like, as a manager, you need to be the one that's holding things together, and you need to be the one who needs to be strong and encouraging. And but at the same time, it's about, actually, everyone's human.
Hmm.
Like, whether you're a manager, whatever you are, everyone has off days. Everyone has days where they don't really want to talk to anyone. And there's a point where people say that you're a manager 24/7, and you are. Like, if one of my boys rang me at 3 a.m., and it's happened before, like, they ring me at 3 a.m. and they'll be like, Ella, I'm really struggling. Or they'll be like, Ella, I've just written a really cool song. And you're like, Sam, I'll deal with you in the morning. But
Yeah.
like, if they rang me at 3 a.m. and be like, I just need to chat, I need to get things off my chest, I'd be there.
Yeah.
But there's other points where you're like, actually, no one can work 24/7, and no one can effectively do their job all the time. So I think when you're being overwhelmed, it's about knowing that you're overwhelmed and admitting you're overwhelmed.
Mm.
I think when I'm overwhelmed, I tend just to have a day just to myself, like exercise, like maybe watch a film or something, like not answer my emails. You know, the world's not going to stop just because you haven't answered your emails for a day. And I think sometimes I think, oh, but we could have missed out on that, or we could have missed out on this. But I'm just like, actually, you know, mental health is so important in the music industry, and
It
it's not
is.
really spoken about enough. And I think being honest, if I'm honest with my boys and I can be like, guys, it's not happening today, I'm having a day off, they're going to be more likely to come to me and be like, Ella, I'm not doing it today, I'm not really feeling it. And
Hmm.
I'll be like, yeah, that's fine. It's that communication that's really important. And I think, 321, as a company, is I always wanted it to be honest. I wanted it to be like a family, and know that we can all be honest with each other, and that's really important to me.
I think you're so correct in saying that mental health is so important because, like you said, everyone is
Mm.
human. We all have off
Mhm.
days, and as much as some people love to work, like myself, and I bet you too as well, that we're kind of
Mm.
work obsessed, aren't we? And we can't stop. We can't relax a lot of the time,
Mm.
but we have to just say like, boys and girls, I've got to take a day off. So I totally agree. And do you kind of implement that more now? That's the kind of mental health thing now. Do you allow them to kind of relax now? Or,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I think, um, especially when blushes were together, um, and things were starting to take off quite quickly. Sorry, I realized quite quickly that they weren't. None of us were expecting it to be as quick as it was. And I think at first I was like, yeah, they're all going to be so excited. They're going to be like, fully up for it and really engaged and committed. Where actually they were petrified. You know,
Mm,
they knew that they had, day jobs to juggle. They knew that they had things were about to change quite quickly.
mhm.
The amount of work they were going to have to put into the band was going to have to increase quite a lot. And they were like, actually, like, there's a lot of pressure on us now. And I think at first I hadn't really considered how much it was going to affect their mental health, because I just thought it was great and all our dreams were coming true and they were doing great things, whereas actually they needed someone to be like, guys, we're still, just 5 people, who want to do good things, but also try to keep them as grounded as I could, because especially in the music industry, you can go from being up here to being at rock bottom again. I think it happened for Blushes, it happens for a lot of bands. You get one really good piece of like news or an opportunity comes in and you think, oh, this is going to be it, and then nothing happens, and they're like, or the opportunity comes in and they're like, the brand are actually like, no, we're not doing that anymore, or that idea's gone now, and you're like, but that was going to be our big break, like that was, and they're like, no, it's gone. So you have to prepare artists for that. And I think especially when it comes to mental health with the artists, there's so much pressure on them that a lot of people don't really consider. But if it happened all the time with Blushes, they'd go out on like a night out or something, someone would come up to them and be like, oh, what are you guys doing, like, and they'll be like, oh, we just played a gig here. And they'll be like, oh, that's really cool. And they'll get messages all the time being like, oh, it's so cool that you're in a band, like you guys must be like traveling all over the country and doing this and doing that. And there's so much pressure when there's people messaging you all the time like, what's next, like when's your next gig, or who are you supporting next, and you're like, I don't know. And it's one of those things where people, I don't think, unless you're in the industry, it all looks like bright lights and big tours and audiences, whereas actually there's a lot that goes on underneath that people aren't really aware of. And I think the idea of being in a band sounds so impressive and exciting, and it's not until you actually get in that band and you're expected to know what EPK is where it all feels a bit real.
Yeah, that was a big reason why I wanted to start this podcast as well, because like you said, you have so many highs and so many lows, and people don't have a clue about what goes on behind the scenes. They think you literally just turn up, perform, have the best performance of your life, and then leave. But they don't know the amount of basically shit that goes on behind the scenes, do they? Yeah. And the amount of work and stress and late nights, no sleep that you need to do in order to get that position.
Yeah. There were so many gigs we did with Blushes where they'd come off the stage and I'd be like, guys, that was so good.
Yeah.
And like Bradley would be like, that was one of the worst I've ever played. Like, wow. And I'd be like, but you'd never know that from being in the audience. Or like you'd say, guys, that was like the best day of tour. And Brad was like, no, but I messed up. I messed up and I ruined it for everyone. And you're like, that pressure that they have to like get everything right. And I think, I don't know if that comes from them thinking the need to impress the whole audience all the time, whereas at most gigs that we did, majority of people were drunk, the majority of people just wanted to have a bit of a dance around, whereas for them this was something that they were being kind of hired or like to do and being paid to do, and they wanted to make sure that they were given the best they could. So when it didn't quite go 100%, they were like, no, we messed up. So and I think that's really important to, like what you were saying just now, is that it's so easy for people to think that everything's so great all the time, and it's not. There's a lot of pressures behind it, but not being negative, there are great parts of being in a band, and it's just about balancing those two things and kind of reminding yourself of those when you are feeling a bit overwhelmed. I think Sam and myself have been working on a PR campaign today, just going through and emailing loads of blogs, and he was like, right, I'm just gonna go and take some time away from the computer and find a bench and sit and cry. And I was like, Sam, what's wrong? And he was like, nah, I'm just feeling a bit like, he was like, it's a mix of emotions. Like, I'm so excited for the release, but I'm also quite overwhelmed at how much work is having to go into all this, and the nerves of how well it's going to do, and hoping that people like the track. And so bless him, I think he's had a bit of a tough day. I think he's been looking at a computer screen for a bit too long today. But yeah, it's like I say, it's all about being prepared and looking after yourself. I think they're the most two important pieces of advice.
Yeah, Carl, I'm going to add like what you said about not to get any negatives away from it, because I've had literally the best memories through music, and I've met literally the best people. I always say this, that the people I work with, I do call them family, because they're so loving, they're so caring, and they're ridiculously talented as well. And every person I work with, they're so caring, which I absolutely adore. And we're also honest with each other as well, and we get on so well. Yeah. And I think that the audience sees that as well. That when you're such a tight knit group and you perform that as well, they can see that in you as well. But which is why I literally adore every single person that I work with in the Hip Hop Orchestra. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really important as well, because when I first started 321, I knew that everyone who I worked with, a family is exactly what I wanted to create. So as soon as I started managing Honeybees and Split the Dealer, I brought them all together in a group chat. We have a group chat where they just support each other. They're all the best of mates. Like, they'll buy each other's merchandise, and they'll be like, guys, like, your t-shirts are so cool, and they'll support each other. And I've always wanted that. And I have a team of people. So I have an animator who I work with at my day job. I brought him in. Honeybees are like, our friend from school is doing our artwork, and she's an amazing illustrator. So I brought her onto the team. My photographer and videographer worked with Blushes before I started working with them, so I brought them in. So it's all kind of like, everyone who works on my team is people who my team trust, and they're all people who have worked with my artist before or worked with me before, and who I know will fit in really well. And that's always been so important to me, is using or building a team of people who all going to get on and all support each other, which is really nice to see as well.
That is, because I was going to ask you actually what kind of size team you have actually, Mo, but that's brilliant. And what kind of what have been sort of the highest moments so far in your career?
My highest moments of my career,
so far,
I mean, there's loads of like little things where, like, loads of little gigs where sometimes you just stand there and you're like, this is what I do, like, this is my job. And they're really cool. Just the random little moments are really nice. I think when Blushes were an enemy, we went to London and we had a big shoot. Now, these are 4 people, 4 members of Blushes who, 6 months before, no one really knew. They were recording their EP in the shed in the garden. And To the Bone was played on Radio 1, and that was recorded in a shed.
wow.
And it was played on Radio 1, and then we went to London and did the shoot with NME. And I remember there was must have been like 30 people there just for Blushes.
Wow.
And they had like stylists and hairstylists and makeup artists and big team of photographers, and like all these people were here for them. And I remember looking at Blushes all day, and they just had the biggest smiles on their faces, and they couldn't believe their luck, And I think knowing that we'd done that together was an amazing feeling. So that was probably one of my biggest highlights. But I think it's things like, so in my career so far, I've got 3 brand endorsements.
Wow.
Which I think are quite difficult to get, I think. And 2 of those have actually been during lockdown in the past few weeks. So they've been really, really exciting. And I think when I first start managing an artist, I always get them to write a bucket list.
Yeah.
And I say to them, go wild, like whatever you want on there. pop it on there, and if I can make it happen, I will. And the brand endorsements, they were all on the bucket list, and Radio 1, Enemy, that's all on the bucket list. And to be able to see those bucket lists and be actually like, I can do that, we can tick those off, is really funny. And it's amazing that something where they kind of like, they've written that down because they want to achieve that, and they think it's a bit silly, and they put it on their bucket list. And then to be able to take that off is actually like such an amazing feeling. And it's really exciting to watch them be so excited over them as well. So
That's really good.
I think they're my highlights so far. But like I said, there's been so many little ones where you're just like, oh, I did that, or we did that together, and that's really cool.
Yeah, because do you ever kind of find it hard to kind of take it in sometimes when you're working so hard? Like these sort of smaller moments and these big moments as well.
Yeah, and I think it's always the case of, that's great, but now I've got to follow it up. Or, that's great, but we've also got another single coming out in 2 weeks' time that we need to do the PR for. There's always something coming up. So I think sometimes it's really tough just to stop and be like, actually, I've done that. Like all the time, my family are like, yeah, but you did this, like, and that's really cool. And you're like, yeah, but I'm so busy, like, there's so much going on. And it's not until you're asked, what are your highlights? We're like, actually, like, yeah, I did that. And
I always love reminding people of what they've done, and that's why I admire what you're doing. You've done so far. I still do to this day, because you're so young and you've achieved so much. So,
because I remember we were talking when I was at Secret Sessions, and I was 18 then. I was a little bubba.
Yeah, because I remember that we actually went to do stuff with Secret Sessions. I was thinking today actually randomly, and what they do as well is fantastic. So hopefully we can all collaborate in the future. Or something that'd be cool. Amazing. I talk about a bucket list though. We kind of mentioned this before the actual podcast. What's your bucket list for 321?
I would love to do more in schools. I'd like to kind of like help the next generation.
Me too.
Of the music industry. I think that's really, really important. I think when you go and ask young people, like I remember when I was 15 and I was that fan in the audience, I had no idea how to get into music. I wouldn't even have the first clue. And I'd think that was just, if you want to be in music, you have to play an instrument. You have to you have to be in a band. And when I remember when I wanted to study music at A level, I couldn't because I didn't play a musical instrument. And I was like, well, but what if I don't want to be a band, but I want to work in the music business? Oh no, we don't do that.
Really?
So, and I think it's one of those things where, unless you're told about these things, you don't know. You're not given the ability to learn. So yeah, that's what I'd really like to do. And I really want to do more to mentor aspiring managers as well. Because when I first started out at 18, poor blushes, that's all I can say, because some of the gigs they played were atrocious.
Really?
And that's my fault, not theirs. That was because I'd never booked gigs before. I didn't really know what I was doing. And fair play to them, they were so supportive, and they knew that I was just starting out as well. So, but everyone has to start somewhere and everyone has to learn. But I know that if I'd been given the opportunity to sit with someone or like have a mentor for the first 6 months, I'd have been in such a different headspace of how I was actually doing and what I could be doing to progress. So I think more needs to be done for artist managers who are just starting out, and that's something that I'd really like to do. But I think just for 321, it's just to be able to grow the team enough to be able to support more artists on a more regular basis. It's very difficult when it's just me on the kind of like development side of things. So being able to grow that team, and I think one of the main things about music is a lot of people ask, when you say you work in the music industry or you're in a band, people assume there's a lot of money involved. And I think one of the things I'd love to be able to do is to be able to say to my artists, to get them to a point where actually they're like, you don't need to work your full-time job anymore. Maybe they'd have to go part-time, but like, I'd like them to be in a position where they could spend more time doing this than working a job that that they don't really want to be doing. And for myself as well, I mean, I have a day job on the side of 321, and being in lockdown and knowing that I've had so much time to focus on 321, the idea of going to work is a bit boring, because I want to spend all day every day working on my artists and helping artists, and so I'd love to be in a position where I could be like, actually, I don't need to work that little job anymore. But I don't, if you're working, and I say this a lot, and I say this quite honestly, and some people aren't going to like this, but if you're working with aspiring artists for the money, you're in the wrong job. Like, there's little money in working with unsigned artists, and if that's not something that you're interested in, then it's not the area for you. I'd never worked with blushes with the ambition to make loads of money straight away. That's not how it works. And I think, these services that I offer at 321 Artist are, I think, quite fairly priced, as my target audience is unsigned emerging artists who probably have other day jobs, and they probably have rent to pay. Some of them might have children to pay for, you know what I mean? So it's about knowing that, if you're in the music industry to make money, and you're working at quite a low level in terms of the artists that you're working with are emerging and just starting out, then you might not be in the right job. And that's the truth of it, and that's what a lot of people sometimes don't really like to hear. But yeah, I think in terms of targets, that was your original question. Targets would be schools, artist managers, and like being able for my artists and myself, I guess, to be financially comfortable to kind of make this kind of like a full-time thing.
Perfect, because I'm doing the same sort of thing. I'm trying to aim to work with schools, education. I think for me is being a teacher as well, obviously, like we mentioned earlier before the podcast. I find education so crucial in any way, especially through music. And so if we could bring our experiences to the new generation of students coming up, I think that's an ultimate dream of mine, is to work with schools and do sort of loads of things with education. That'd be really fantastic.
Yeah,
but earlier you mentioned you brought something up which I wanted to ask you about, mentors. Do you have a mentor at the moment?
I don't have a mentor. I've never had a mentor. I would have loved to have a mentor. But again, it's similar. I wouldn't really know where to look, or who I would need and why. I think I'd really have to sit down and be like, what do I think I'm missing? What do I think I could benefit from having a mentor? And when the right time to have a mentor is, like, have I missed it? Should I have got one before? Am I at the right time to be having a mentor kind of where I'm at now? Or should I be looking at a mentor like in a year's time? So I think I'd have to kind of sit down, but I haven't had a mentor. Have you had a mentor before?
Never, but with me, I kind of have had mentors, because I've realized that the people I've met along the industry, along the years of doing my orchestra, I've met some really genuine people in the industry who I feel are my mentors. If that makes, I haven't had like a proper mentor, but like I said, I've had people that I've worked with through the years who I always go to if I need any advice or anything, or a bit of confidence. Like a good friend of mine who I've done a previous episode with, a guy called Rob Littlejohn, who's a BBC radio editor, who I've considered like a brother to me. He's for someone with so much experience in such a high company like the BBC. He's always had the time to like sit down with me and chat with me and give me great advice. So people like that, and also people in my orchestra, such as my good friend Adam Karanetsky, who's one of the violists in the group. He's taught me so much. So people like that have always helped inspire me. But I always take inspiration from every single person I work with in terms of the orchestra and all the musicians to the people in different companies. So yeah, I like to like take snippets of him in it.
I think as well, I think it's not all about, you can have, like you say, it's not necessarily having a mentor, but I have people who I can go to who I know will be honest with me. There's like an artist who I've been friends with for a while, and I'll go to them with an idea and I'll be like, right, this is what I'm thinking of doing, and they'll be like, oh, that's a terrible idea. That's not an idea you should follow through. And you're like, okay. But you need someone to be like, you need someone who's gonna not just say, yeah, that's a great idea all the time, because you're not going to achieve anything. To be fair, he'll be like, no, that's not a good idea, and then he'll be like, it's not one of your best ideas, but how can you mix, like, how can we change it so it is, or like, why do you think you need to do that? Why do you think you need to offer that service? Like, who's going to benefit from that? And it makes you think about things that you haven't really thought of before. So I think in terms of that, there's a lot of people around me, and I'm really lucky. Like, I've got so many friends in the industry. My boyfriend's in the industry, and there's a lot of people around me who I know that I can get advice from, opinions from, feedback from. If there's things I don't know, I don't feel silly going to them and asking. So in terms of that, I'm really lucky. And I think that's because I've always been so confident, but also eager to network with people and reach out and ask what can be uncomfortable questions. I've always been like that. And that's how I've got some of the best opportunities for my artists, is just by, dropping someone a DM, being like, I noticed you do this, like I do this, like let's have a chat kind of thing. And having that confidence to start those conversations is really important, and it's something that I've done since day one at Secret Sessions and since managing Blushes, because I didn't really know how else to do it. I had a platform on Twitter. I knew I had a lot of people following me who might benefit, or I might benefit from, that I'd never really utilized before. And I went through, and there was a guy following me who worked at London Live at the time, which is like London's news channel, I'd say. And he worked there, and he was like, oh, I've just looked at your page and you manage artists. And I was like, yeah. And then a week later we were in the studios recording a session, so that was really cool. And that's a contact that I've kept with, and we're really good friends now, just by dropping him a quick DM saying hello and introducing myself. So it's about not being afraid to put yourself out there. However, looking back as an artist manager now, and someone kind of in industry who I get messages from, and I'm sure you're probably the same, if you are like DMing people, messaging people as an artist, there's definitely an etiquette you should follow.
Yeah, of course there is.
You shouldn't just randomly message people like the links to your songs. Like,
yeah. I know all about the etiquette, so don't worry about that. But so kind of like adding to that, kind of what's been like kind of the best sort of advice you've been given over since you started 321?
My best piece of advice I've been given. I think that's a really good question. I think a lot of the work I've done with 321, I've been quite independent with. And I think because I haven't had a mentor, I've kind of just been winging it as I go and kind of hoping for the best. So I don't think I've really sat down with many people who've kind of given me advice. I think people telling me that I need to sit and work on my ideas more has been really important, not rushing into any idea that I have. There's a lot of people who you can tell have had an idea and like an hour later put it on social media, or they've done things really quickly, whereas I've always been told to kind of sit through things, and not everything has to be done straight away, and being organized and kind of being thorough. I think that's been a piece of advice I've been given. And I think advice I've been given has come from seeing people make mistakes, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing how people have done things and be like, right, I'm not doing it like that. Like, and kind of giving myself the advice from looking on at other people, which sounds like a really horrible thing to say, but I think there's definitely things that I've done that I look back on being like, you shouldn't have, like, I don't know, like, are you, like, I made my first EPK I ever made. I looked back at it the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, like, how anyone used that, I don't know. But I think if I had kind of taken more time on it, or if I had, I don't know, if I had done a bit more research, then it would have been 10 times better. So I think it's about allowing yourself to make mistakes and looking back at things you've done, and through, you know, trying really hard not to look at it and try to ignore it, looking at it being like, okay, where did this go wrong, or where could we have done better? So I think the advice that I've got has mainly come from myself, but I think any advice about organization, about not putting too much stress on yourself, that's another important piece of advice I've been given. I think looking at what you've achieved more on a regular basis, that's another piece of advice that I'm still working on, and kind of just taking that downtime, like we were saying earlier, about understanding that a day off isn't going to harm anyone. That's something I'm still working on, I think, especially during lockdown at the moment, and knowing that there's so many people on like social media saying like, you know, you're never going to get this time again, and you need to make sure every day is as like productive as you can. And, you know, waking up being like, I really don't feel like working today, but then being like, Ella, this is another day you're going to lose if you don't work today. And it's finding that balance, I think. But yeah, I mean, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
You know, I'm kind of like the same as you, really. Like, I've just known when to take a step back when needed, because, like you said, your mental and physical health is so damn important. And I know I've learned sometimes the hard way when my body's telling me to like just say shut up and relax for a bit, because you have to. Because I do so much work in terms of teaching and running all the orchestra as well, plus everything else in between. I know where my limits are now. So if I know that I physically can't do any more work, I just have to just spend at least a couple of hours with myself of that day to see, do I ever go for a walk or read a book, put a bit of music on, or play some computer, whatever I need to just let some steam off for a bit, so I can come back either later that day or the day later just with like more energy. Because trying to work, like you said, about like kind of working when you don't feel like doing it is not the best thing for you, and you're just going to make yourself worse. Because I realized that I kind of like talk about kind of learning the hard way. A few years ago when I did my TED talk, I overworked myself to the point of getting pneumonia, and I've never been so ill in my life. Because working as a full-time teacher, I actually mentioned in an episode how it all came about, actually, in the behind-the-scenes stories. But I'll mention it briefly here. I was working so hard as a full-time teacher, plus planning of the TED Talk as well. And obviously, as you know, TED Talks are 20 minutes long, usually. So the amount of planning that goes into giving a talk for that long, plus the performance as well, is ridiculous. So I've learned to kind of compartmentalize my life in terms of focusing on different things so I might do teaching from say 8 to 3, that's my time. From say 3:30 to 4:30 is my say chill time. 4:30 to 5:30 is my workout time. 6 to there is my emails planning time. So I kind of like being disciplined in your day. I've realized instead of doing that little bits here and there, like one or two emails there, plus a bit of planning there, plus a bit of that, I realized you don't get anything done. So I've been very disciplined. I've taught myself to be disciplined in terms of doing kind of putting things in sections. So all my emails in one go, all my planning in one go, all of that way. And I feel like I get a lot more done that way, just focusing on one thing at a time. But like you said as well, like just taking a step back when you feel like your body's about to burn out again, and then you can come back even stronger the next time. That's going to be my advice on
Definitely.
things. And also knowing what you want to achieve as well. Like you said about your bucket list, about going to schools and education, that's amazing. And I think just knowing exactly what you want to achieve, or putting the work in to really know what it takes to get to that stage, and just work through it. And I know you'll get there, and keeping that positive attitude as well, and having the right people around you, as you mentioned earlier, because I realize that having the right people around you who are honest and yet so loving and caring, it makes everything so much better and easier.
Yeah,
And
it does. Yeah.
yeah, and if you find the people that see the same vision as you, that's another thing actually, is knowing exactly what your vision is, because I realize people buy into you first, and you kind of and you have to kind of look at yourself as a kind of business in a way. I know you're running your
Yeah,
own
you do.
company,
Yeah.
yeah. And so if you don't know what you're talking about for your own idea or project or company or business, then how do you expect other people to help you as well? Yeah, so I realized I know what you want. Well, know who you are first. Be yourself. That's the main thing. Be yourself first. That's the most important thing. Know what your company's about, or your project, whatever it might be, and then kind of know how to sell it in a way, and then work your backside off. And that's kind of
Yeah.
like a mixed answer there, but they're kind of being the things that I've learned over the years, and I've never been
Yeah.
happier. I feel like now everything's just clicked into place now, and
Yeah.
yeah, and just
It
what.
takes time. It takes time to get to that point, and it takes a lot of trial and error
Oh,
for
he
sure
does.
to kind of get to that point where you're like, yeah, now everything feels like it's right, and we're on a kind of right path and a good pace kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about not putting yourself in too much pressure to get to that point sooner
Mm.
than is actually doable. And like you say, it comes naturally, and you get to that point, and you're like, yeah, actually, this is going really well now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just about understanding that there's going to be points where it's not so great. But those moments, and when those moments where things aren't as great are those moments where you're like, you look back on and be like, actually, I've achieved a lot, and I'm doing really well. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be a well-oiled machine like every single day, which is
Yeah.
really important to remember.
Yeah. 'Cause I think that with social media, we kind of touched on earlier, is
Mm.
you shouldn't let social media determine how fast you put things out as well. Because you mentioned about social media as well. And I think social media is so crucial and amazing for getting your work out there and showing people your portfolio of what you've done in the past. It's absolutely incredible. And I don't know where I would have been without social media. I would known about events, or even obviously how we met through social media. So if it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't have met some of the best people in my life to about events and so forth. And I would have learned so much. At the same time, though, you've got to think of it as, don't let it determine the kind of content you put out there, because I see people kind of rushing to get things out there when it's not quite right yet. It's like a kind of like a half-baked cake. You can't expect to put out good work if it's not ready yet.
Yeah.
So I'd rather, like, if I look up to a certain artist, I'd rather with me anyway, I'd rather have quality over quantity, if that makes sense. There's certain artists I look up to, like Joyner Lucas, for instance. Obviously, a rapper, he's an amazing rapper, and he's not one of these kind of artists that puts out tracks like every like 30 seconds, it seems like. Every track he puts out is like a properly made like movie, if that makes sense, because every video he puts out is like a movie,
Yeah.
and it has a really amazing story behind it. And for me anyway, I appreciate the craft that they put into their work. So I would rather people just took the time to step back and rather put out work that is of amazing quality, rather than just putting out half-baked cakes, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think you see it all the time, right, on social media, and you a lot of my following is bands, artists, artist managers, and you see the same people all the time being
Yeah.
like, releasing new music, and some of it is great. There's, I'm not going to mention names, but there's a band in lockdown who are releasing an EP every single week.
Oh wow.
So, and part of me is like, wow, I mean, to be able to have that much content and you know, it comes with a lot of talent and things like that, and there are positives to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Some would say limited positives, but we'll go with positives.
Yeah.
But there's also that threat that it's not going to be the highest quality. You know, if you're having to release an EP every single week, that's a lot of music,
It
and that's
is.
a lot of pressure to make all the tracks as good as they can be,
Mm-hmm.
and also the marketing behind it. Um, it'll be very interesting, I think, to look at the end of lockdown to see how it performed and how well they did. And I'd love to be able to have maybe a conversation with them just to see kind of what their thinking behind it was and how well they think it did, because I think it's a really interesting idea. I think during lockdown a lot of artists have had to adapt, and they've all tried to come up with creative ideas of how they can do things differently and how they can keep audiences engaged without being able to perform live. But I think some bands and artists may have done that better than others.
Mm-hmm. I'll leave it at that. Talk about sort of adapting though. I'll might finish soon actually because you've been so good. Talk about adapting. How have you adapted during lockdown?
I think making my artists more focused,
Mm-hmm.
and having things to achieve each week have been really helpful. So every Monday we'll have like an hour's check-in. We'll be like, this is what's going on this week. How was last week? What do we need to be doing this week? I've been setting them targets and challenges. So it will be things like, okay, today, your challenge is to find 5 new blogs that you hadn't heard of before,
Mm-hmm.
or your challenge is to listen to 5 new bands, or things like that they can just kind of drop into if they need a bit of something to focus on, something to do, something to feel like they're being productive. Because at the end of the day, there's not too much they can be doing. You know, I can't be like, right, if you just keep writing new content, that'd be really helpful, because they're just going to create content that's not as good because I feel like I'm forcing them to write it. So I think in terms of keeping up your communication and having weekly check-ins, it's good anyway, but I think during lockdown it's been especially good. um I mean, Honeybees are a really good example. So they released a track during lockdown, and they're like, we really want to release a music video. And I was like, well, it's going to have to be a home job. You know, you can't go out and do anything. You can't really film anything or anyone. And Charlie goes to me. Charlie is the one in the team who will constantly try his luck. He's a charmer. He's one of these people who will try to sweet talk you and be like, this is a great idea. So he came to me and was like, Ella, would you be opposed to us recording a music video with 50 people? And I was like, what, with a global pandemic? Yeah, I think I probably would be against it. And he was like, but what if I could pull it off? And I was like, if you could pull it off, Charlie, go for it.
Yeah.
And Charlie did all the homework, he did everything he needed, and they released a music video with 50 extras.
Wow.
And what they did was they divvied up the song to each person had like half a lyric or half a sentence from the song, and loads of people, so it's 50 in total, wrote the lyrics on pieces of cardboard, stood on their doorsteps dancing around, and a videographer called Bradley Martin stood about 2-3 meters away and filmed everyone on their doorsteps. And it was meant to kind of like show you know, people at home and the whole DIY aspect of writing on cardboard and just kind of using whatever you could find in the house kind of thing. But fair play to Charlie. Charlie did a great job, and it's, you know, 4.5 minutes of silliness and people laughing and joking and dancing, and there's a couple of cute dogs in there as well. And
Oh,
it's one of those things where you look at it, and I think that's probably another of my highlights of my career, because it was one of those things where Charlie was like, I want to make a music video, so I'm going to make a music video. And it worked really, really well, and it got a really great response. And I think that's how he adapted. You know, he wanted a music video. He thought how he could do it safely, and he got a really good team of people involved who made all his dreams come true. And yeah, so I think there's ways of adapting. Some artists and bands have been really creative. There's obviously been an increase in live streams and things like that on social media. It's been really, really interesting, and it's been inspiring, I think, to see how a lot of artists just persevered and just kind of got on with it, which has been lovely. And I think it's really confirmed to a lot of people why we do this, and why how actually the music industry, there's a lot wrong with the music industry, but there's also a lot right with it. There's a lot of really good people, really good ideas, who without it, the world would be a much sadder place, I think.
Definitely.
So it's always really nice to sit back and be like, actually, we're all doing a really, really good thing, I think.
And you know, I want to finish on a lovely message like that. But before we go, is there anything that you like to share or promote before we go?
Just that if you're an artist or an artist manager looking for support, my Twitter handle or my Instagram and socials and things like that is just at 321artist.com. It's my website, and 321artist is my socials. And then yeah, my email is ella@321artist.com.
There we go. I think that was brilliant. But it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Ella. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so nice just to have a chat.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And that's the end of our episode. And peace.